Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters Podcast. I'm your host, Liz Lang, and I'm here with Dr. Mark Burton. In this podcast, we will talk about all things mental health. Thank you so much for joining us. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Dr. Mark Burton, and this week we are going to talk about self-care. And we have definitely talked about this in the past. So I want to start by maybe discussing why self-care matters.
Well, I think I talk about this. I'm trying to think. Well, with most clients, I think, certainly with individual clients, maybe more than couples. Although, often with couples as well. And people forget the importance of it. And it made me think of one of my clients today who happened to be a long-term therapist anyway, and really no level of self-care.
Wow.
And the therapist realizes that needs to change. And that's what we started talking about, in addition to the other things. So I think one of the problems is our lives tend to be pretty busy.
Yep.
I mean, if you think about it, if you have a family where both adults are employed, you have kids, you're always doing something.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest problems, I think, in our culture is that there's very little downtime. And I think that it takes a real effort to schedule in downtime. I think it's important because we get burned out, we get tired, in fact, I saw a couple yesterday, and that's the issue, is that there's no downtime. So I would say self-care is similar to downtime, maybe a little bit more well-defined, because you're doing certain things with self-care, whereas downtime often isn't that well-defined. It's just, a lot of people like just sitting out on the, in the backyard, not doing anything. That's kind of downtime. But I would say that's probably self-care as well. But I think the biggest problem is that our lives are too busy.
Yeah.
And if you have children, actually, I don't know that I've heard you talk about this, driving your kids around to all their various activities. Maybe you've done a better job at regulating that. But, parents, the free time that they have often, if you have, more than two kids, even two kids, you're on the road all the time, taking them this lesson to that sport, to this sport. And so a lot of your time is taken up doing that.
My kids are pretty young. So we haven't run into that yet. I mean, our oldest is 10, and we're trying to find something to get her involved in. She tried soccer, and that was kind of a bust. She didn't like it, which is fine. And so, and our youngest is almost 4. I mean, but yeah, my mom certainly had that issue running kids to and fro and everywhere. And, we were all very, very involved in sports. And so that's why she finally made me get my driver's license, because in fact, my permit expired. Like, I didn't care that much about driving. I wasn't that excited. I didn't love it like most teenagers tend to. And so, my permit had expired, and one day she pulled me out of school and she's like, "You're getting your driver's license." Like, wait a minute. Yeah.
So getting back to the reason it's important, it's because we are too busy, and it's so easy to get burnout. And when you get burnout, you don't sleep well and you get tired a lot of the time. And when you're tired, life isn't exciting, fun, engaging. I mean, they're all those things. And I see that every day in clients. Yeah. I've never thought specifically about each couple or client, but as I'm just thinking about who I've seen this week, that's been an issue in quite a few of the clients that I've seen, is a lack of self-care. Even though, most people will say, "I know I should do this," which is probably something we should talk about, because I would guess that self-care is not going to be one of those things that our listeners are going to go, "Oh, that's a new idea." It's probably going to be more about, how do I find the time? How do I do this with work and kids and all of that? And I think a lot of the time we may think of self-care as taking a lot of energy. And so at the end of the day, you're worn out and you think, "Oh, I don't really have energy to do anything." I think some self-care does require energy. A lot of self-care doesn't. So.
Right. And so in terms of self-care, it's mostly about feeling good or relaxing. And so
Yeah.
it's going to be different for everybody, but it's
Right.
about what feels good to you. That's
Yes.
why, I mean, self-care can be such a very loose term because
Hmm.
it's going to be different for everybody. Now, for some people, exercise is self-care, and but some people it's not, right? And so,
Yeah, I'm interested in that. I exercise every day, but Tuesdays I take a day
mhm.
off. And I see it as self-care.
Okay.
I really think of it that way because I mean, if you think about taking care of your body, and I mentioned before that I have a real interest in longevity. It's probably the most important thing for people to do throughout the lifespan. But do you know people who don't think of exercise as self-care?
So, yes and no. I do and I don't. So, when I first started exercising, it did
Uh-huh.
not feel like self-care because I didn't like doing it. And I think that's why a lot of people
Mhm.
might not consider it
Right,
self-care
right.
because when you first start exercising, you often hate it.
That makes
And
I get that part. Yeah.
I mean, and so when I first started biking, oh man, I mean, I think I did 5 miles in 30 minutes and it was all I could do just to finish.
Hmm.
And, here I am 2 years later, I am obsessed with cycling. I will go bike all the miles. I will bike 50 miles just for the heck of it. And
Right. You're going to
so,
go on a 100-mile ride in a couple of weeks. So, yeah.
it's over 2 days, but yeah, I'm getting ready to do a big century ride. And so,
Mhm.
biking now is a little bit more self-care for me, but I still need downtime, right? I still need time to just
Yes.
relax. So, I
Yeah.
guess exercise can be part of my self-care, and it's certainly a very important part of my mental health.
Hmm.
In fact, I got a bike trainer, which is it's basically something that I can hook my bike up to and I can still bike indoors in the
Oh,
winter.
okay. Yeah.
Because what I found is I was getting depressed in the winter.
Hmm.
My depression was getting bad because I couldn't go out and bike. And so I needed something to help me. And so, yes, exercise is part of my self-care, but I still very much need something that isn't exercise to really feel whole, to really feel complete. And it can be really hard for me to find the balance. In fact, I think that's kind of one of my struggles right now is I feel like I'm maybe spending too much time biking and
Hmm.
I don't have enough downtime. My days are so busy and they all kind of run together and I don't have enough just time to just kind of chill and relax.
See, and I think that's an important distinction to make
Mhm.
because, for instance, somebody I saw yesterday, I think sometimes I make general statements and
Mhm.
they're not always true. Anyway, anxious people seem to me to one of the ways to handle anxiety is to always be busy.
Okay.
Because it doesn't give you time to think and the words I use often are be quiet with yourself. I think
Mhm.
that's a really good skill to have. And for some people who are anxious, they can't do that. And I was thinking about how sad that is that you couldn't just like, Utah right now.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've been following the weather. We've had an incredibly mild, usually it's up in the 90s by now.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened. It's been wet and cool, and it's just beautiful. And
Mhm.
so to go out and sit outside and just sit, I will often do that uh,
Mhm.
because I think that for a lot of people, they don't have enough of that. What
Yeah.
you're just, you can call it relaxing, although, you know, relaxing can be different for everyone as well. But I think sometimes we just need to sit
Mhm.
and, be quiet with ourselves is what I call it. But that's hard for a lot of people. Very,
Mhm.
very hard. And I think if you have some anxiety, it's even doubly hard.
Yeah, it can be. And so, I think exercise is certainly something everybody should be doing.
Right.
And, again, when you first start, if you haven't exercised regularly before, you're going to hate it because it's
Mhm.
not fun, but you need to keep trying exercise until you find something you do like. Because once you find something that you do enjoy, you're going to get hooked. You'll want to do it more. And
I
it
agree.
will become part of your self-care. I also feel like there is a distinction between,
Mhm.
or you can have both. You can have self-care as
Yes.
exercise and you can have self-care as something that is downtime and that is relaxing. Because I mean, honestly, there's times where exercise, it doesn't always feel good. because you're pushing yourself,
Right.
right?
And so you're right. I think there can be time for exercise where it's just working on keeping your body healthy, which
Yeah.
probably is a different category than self-care. But if you think about some of the common things that people do that I hear, reading is
Yep.
a good self-care because people get a lot of enjoyment with that. Not doing something active like taking a hot bath, taking baths. I used to have a lot of younger mothers, and that was one of the things they really wanted,
Yeah.
was after a day of taking care of kids, just to go soak in a hot bath. And that is really good self-care because you've got that alone time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're reading while you're doing it, but self-care really doesn't have to cost a lot of money or
No.
any money at all. I mean, all of the things that I'm thinking of, going on a walk,
Yeah.
like just a slow walk. So oftentimes people go on walks for exercise, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if you just go on a walk in the neighborhood? Connection, we've talked about
Yes.
how important connection is, or community is one of the things. And I think nowadays, that for a lot of people in the communities where they live, it's hard for them to get out and walk and connect with other people. I think that's a really good way to do self-care as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Now,
in my neighborhood, I mean, there's no way to walk and connect with many people. We're just too spread out.
and so I do a lot of group rides. And for
Mhm.
me, when I'm doing a group ride, it definitely falls into that category of self-care when I do a group bike ride because
So
I'm
I'm curious, do you
socializing.
talk? I see sometimes bikers and they're biking side by side and they're actually communicating. Can you do that?
Hmm.
Like, and you
Yeah.
can hear each other.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, you talk loud, but you know,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, and it depends too on, so at least the group rides that I've done, we aren't going, like, we're not going so fast
Hmm.
that you can't talk. I mean, there's certainly times, but yeah, I mean, I did a group ride this evening, and I mean, we weren't pushing ourselves because the air quality is so bad in Indiana right now because the wildfires in Canada. And so we were really taking it slower, and we had people chatting the whole time, and yeah, you can hear each other. I
Yeah.
mean, if it's really windy or if you're going really fast, then maybe
Then you
not,
can.
but yeah, I mean,
So, activities where you can connect with people,
mhm.
that's, I think for most people, that's pretty good self-care.
Yeah, so every Thursday evening I do another group ride that's very casual. It's more self-care than exercise really because I'm an experienced enough biker that it's a very slow pace. And so I
Hmm.
I do it really literally just to socialize and to chat and to talk with people. So, that can be self-care. Church can be a great
Right.
form of self-care. And I want to point out that, there are ways that people do self-care that do involve spending money. And if it's something that you can afford, then I think it's certainly a valid option. A lot of people like getting their nails done, or they'll go
Like a
get
spa day or something,
a
right?
spa day or getting their
Yeah.
hair done. So
Yeah.
my dad does sports clips, and I guess for sports clips, it's like a haircut place just for guys. And they kind of make it like they do like a facial massage, and like you get, I think, like this
Oh, wow.
yeah, like it's a whole thing. Like they'll do a scalp massage and a facial massage, and men typically get their hair cut a lot more often than women. At least both my
Uh-huh.
dad and my husband do. They
Right.
get their hair
That's
cut,
true.
yeah, like once a month. And
Uh-huh.
sometimes my dad is like, not really necessarily time for a haircut, but I want a haircut.
You want to go get that scalp massage, which is really nice. That's one of my favorite things. I didn't know such a place existed. I don't
Yeah,
know that
sports
I
clips. I think it's
have
sports
to look
clips.
into it.
Yeah, yeah, they really pamper you.
So
And
you're right that there are certainly some people who have the means to, get massages or, pedicures or manicures, spa days, things like that, which is really good self-care. It
mhm,
doesn't, it can be quite pricey,
yeah.
but self-care doesn't have to cost money. I think that going back to something that you said at the start is it's going to be different for every person. And sometimes I'll run into someone who, and I'll say, well, what do you do for self-care? And for some people, they've not done it or they haven't thought about it, and they say, I have no idea,
Really.
that's kind of mind boggling for me because,
Mhm.
I think you and I both do pretty good self care.
Mhm.
And so it's really confusing to me that people haven't thought about that. But I think, people stay too busy and they don't think, what am I going to do to take care of myself?
Hmm.
And in the role, I think this is probably more true of mothers. Here's my general statement again. I think mothers are really focused on taking care of others.
Yes.
And I think they often feel like they don't have time to
Oh, I've
take care
heard.
of
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for them to figure out, or for if they're partnered, to have their partner figure out how to help, each other get some good self-care. Because I think you're a better parent
Hmm.
I think you're a better parent if you take care of yourself, because you're less likely to be frustrated or angry at some of the crazy things that all kids are going to do.
Yeah.
And I think self-care is one of those things that helps you stay calm.
And I think another thing is you should have multiple tools in your belt
Yeah.
for in terms of
Right.
self-care. You need
Right.
to have multiple means.
Hmm.
So one thing of self-care that I developed early on when my oldest was very young, very, very young, and this was when I was dealing with postpartum depression and I was going through therapy, and my therapist brought up self-care. And so what I came up with was I would make a mug of hot chocolate and watch Pride and Prejudice.
Oh,
And
okay.
right? So that was my self-care. But I mean, I certainly probably shouldn't have been doing that every day, at least not the hot chocolate, right? Because that's a lot of sugar. So that was something that felt good to me. It was relaxing
Yeah. I
and
think you bring up another good point that we should probably touch on, and that's television or
yeah,
watching movies.
yes,
That to me, yeah, I think you have to be careful,
yes.
because, like, if you consider, I'll make this distinction. I actually don't know that I've ever seen a reality show in its entirety. I know of them,
Hmm.
but so you have these reality shows, and then you compare it, say, with Pride and Prejudice.
Yes.
Now, I mean, I know that show because my wife and I like Jane Austen a lot, and so
Hmm.
I don't know how many times I've watched all the different versions. But if you think about there's a difference. One is kind of mindless,
Yes.
meaning reality shows, and the other, I mean, the thing that I think is engaging about those types of shows is the language. The
Mm.
language that is used is
Yes.
it's beautiful, and it really pulls you in, I think. Anyway, so I think you have to be careful about, because I hear some people say, well, one of the ways I relax is to watch television, but what they're watching is typically this, and I'm making a judgment here. So
Right.
for our listeners, I get it. I'm making a judgment that some shows are pretty mindless. I don't know if that's a good self-care. I guess all I want to say to our listeners is be careful and think about it, and
Right.
and make sure that it is relaxing, that you're not just checking out. I think there's a difference between checking out and doing self-care.
And I think moderation in all things too, because, I think self-care could certainly involve maybe you have a show that you're watching with your spouse, right? And you're enjoying it together.
Right, right. And that's I think a little different as well.
Yes. And so, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here because there was a reality TV show that I really liked. It
What did
was
you like?
it was America's Next Top Model.
Okay, and
Yeah,
there are
I'm
so
not.
many, I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so it was parts of it were obnoxious because there was a lot of because for the ratings they played up all the petty drama between the girls because it's basically you take like 14 girls and they're competing for the title of the best model. And so every week it's a competition and there's elimination. And so there's a lot of petty drama and I couldn't stand the petty drama, but what I loved about that show was the artistic aspect because every week these girls would I mean they would create these beautiful images and do these incredible things with their bodies and just create beautiful art and I loved the artistic aspect of this show and so I really enjoyed it. So I mean if for some people they love it, they thrive on it, right? And so but I think
Right,
you
but
are
I just wonder, is that really self-care?
I don't know.
I
I
mean,
think
the way you're describing it makes sense to me.
yeah.
Because what you're doing is it's almost like you're filtering out
Yes.
the mindless part, right? And you're focusing on this artistic part, which kind of goes back to Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice, this idea of I mean, it's artistic. It's more artistic than a lot of shows,
Hmm.
right? And so you're filtering out the what I would call the mindless stuff. So again, I realize I'm making this judgment call, and I think a lot of people think of it's certainly entertainment. So I'm
Yes.
not saying it's not entertaining,
Yeah.
but then is entertainment the same as self-care?
Well, it can be. I've heard people say,
Okay,
they love going to the movie theater by themselves.
right.
I've heard people say that before. They
Okay.
really enjoy it, and a lot of it's about the experience. So I think it can be. I think a lot of it depends on the way it makes you feel, and are you doing it in moderation? Because we all know that spending too much time in front of the TV is probably not
Right.
a good thing. Or if it's so part of your routine, it can certainly turn into this isn't self-care anymore. This is just something I am mindlessly, numbly doing. But I
Yeah.
think I would say it's about intention.
Hmm.
Self-care is intentional.
I like that. I think you're right. That
So I mean,
that
y-
it is about intention.
yeah, I mean, so I am intentionally doing this. I'm intentionally sitting down to watch this show to feel good because it makes me
Okay.
laugh or because I enjoy it, right? And so I really think intent matters in terms of self-care.
Actually, you made me think of something. Laughing is really important
It
for us.
really is. Yeah.
And sometimes, actually, I can think of, shows that a lot of people would think are pretty mindless that make me laugh. But I
Yeah.
think that in our world, for a lot of people, we don't laugh enough.
Yeah.
And so finding things that make us laugh. So I guess I'm shifting the way I think about that. Although I think some of the reality shows, I'm going to go back to this. I don't know that they make people laugh so much as they get caught up in other people's drama. But
Maybe.
if it's something that is really amusing and you're sharing a laugh, especially say with a partner,
Hmm.
that can be really, really a good thing for people.
And Mark, there are some people who they love it. They thrive on other people's dramas. They get a lot. I don't understand it. I'll
Right.
acknowledge that.
Right. But again, do you think that's self-care? And I
I
don't
don't
know the
know.
answer to that.
Yeah.
But I think getting wrapped up in other people's drama,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd put that in self-care.
Well, it's definitely not for you.
No, it's not for me.
It's very much not self-care for
No,
Mark. Cross
no,
that off the list.
no. So all I want our listeners to do is think about it. And if it's really self-care for you, great.
Yeah.
But is there something else that might be even better self-care? And so I'm
Yeah.
not saying turn off the reality TV, but if that's your only self-care, I'd think about that.
Find something else too. Like you should have,
Right,
I mean, if your only
right,
self-care is catching up once a week on your favorite TV show with your spouse,
right.
that's not enough. That's not
No,
often, that self-care isn't often enough.
no.
I mean, and self-care is something we should probably be trying to do at least every day. And, people feel like it has to be this big, long thing. And sometimes it should be, right? Like, taking a long hot bath,
Right, or long walk or
a
something,
long walk.
or
But
something like that.
But
Yeah,
if some days you only have time for 15 minutes to just relax and do something that feels good to you, do something that's self-care, 15 minutes, take it, right?
right. And we've talked a lot. We don't need to talk any more than just mentioning meditative practice.
Yeah.
And so meditative practice is something that, I mean, can range from 10 minutes to 45 minutes.
Hmm.
And I would say that's clearly in the camp of self-care. There are yoga,
Hmm.
is certainly in, for me anyway, I would say that's clearly in self-care. There are a lot of things. Would you say you do other things other than riding your bike and watching America's Top Model? Is that still on?
No, I don't watch it anymore. I gave up on it. So a few years ago, they added in guys. It was just
Uh-huh.
girls, and they added in guys, and it became a little too sexualized for my taste.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I gave up on it. I was like, that's just too much for me. So here is my favorite form of winter self-care. And
Hmm.
this is a little quirky and people laugh at me, but I absolutely love, love, love this. So what I'll do is I'm a cereal eater and I'll eat cereal every morning for breakfast. And so what I'll do is and I have an electric blanket. And so in the winter, I'll turn my electric blanket on all the way up and I'll get it in a ball so it gets
Doesn't
really
it?
nice and hot.
Okay.
And then I'll put my milk in the freezer to let it get really, really cold. I'll eat my cereal and then I'm really cold and I'll go wrap up in an electric blanket. And it feels so good to be so cold and then go get into something really warm. I know it's really quirky, but Mark, it is my absolute favorite thing to do, and it feels so good to me.
Uh-huh. I hope your electric blanket doesn't burst into flames being wrapped up in the ball at some point.
No, they're way
Oh,
too
they're better.
yeah,
Okay.
they're way too technologically advanced for that.
You only do that in the wintertime then.
Usually, yeah, I mean just because in the summer it doesn't feel as good, but I mean in the winter, I have other things. My other thing that I like to do for self-care is I will listen. I'm a big audio book or podcast. I do a lot of audiobooks and podcasts. And
Hmm.
so I'll play some mindless game like solitaire or a puzzle game and listen. That's another form of self-care that I like to do. Or another form of self-care that's also kind of meditative is I'll turn on music, and the music will vary. Sometimes it's just classical, sometimes it's music that I like. And I literally I lay on the floor in the prone position and just kind of zone out. I listen to the music and I'm laying and I'm doing nothing, just listening and getting lost in the music, put both headsets
Yeah.
in and just
Sounds
get
really
lost.
nice.
It is really nice. And so it's a little bit of meditation, a little bit of self-care, but it feels really good. Like I don't ever get to do that because throughout the day, I can't stand to have both my ears occupied. Like I have to have one ear unplugged so I can hear what's going on, right? Because I've got
Yeah.
young kids.
Right.
And so it
Right.
feels really good at the end of a long day or if I'm feeling really stressed out to just put in both my headphones and just get lost in music. And
Hmm.
that's and completely relax and focus on breathing. And so that's really nice. So I've got a few different things that I like to do for self-care. But
Yeah.
I mean, my electric blanket is definitely my quirkiest one. But oh my
But
goodness, it feels so good. And like, because when I put my milk in the freezer, it gets really cold, and I'm really cold, like
so I'm
goosebumps cold.
curious how you got onto that. Like, how did that happen?
I've been well because I'm always cold after I eat cereal. Like, and I've been eating cereal for breakfast for 30 years now.
What's your favorite cereal for breakfast?
Oh, the bad kind. I try not to buy it. The
You
sugary.
aren't going to tell us because it's so bad.
Oh, I mean, it varies. Anything that's really
You-
sugary, like Fruit Loops or Berry Colossal Crunch or
uh,
something, I try not to buy it because I will eat it. And so I try to do like Cinnamon Life or like Honey Oat Blenders or Raisin
uh,
Bran. I try to go with those options. Those are some of my
channeling
favorite.
your inner child, Liz.
Oh my goodness. I thought I would outgrow cereal. Mark, I am 30 years old and I still love my cereal.
Mhm. No,
So,
I get that. So for me, I have a routine, which I probably mentioned. I get up earlier than anybody else in the house,
mhm,
and I like to have my coffee, and I come in and then I do my needlepoint, and it's
mhm,
quiet. Because often if I'm doing needlepoint throughout the day, I'll put on a podcast or music or something. But in the morning, I'm totally quiet.
mhm.
And that is my quiet time. And then I will exercise always after. And I do watch TV while I exercise. And that I consider to be essential self-care for me.
Okay.
And then the other thing where I mentioned about sitting quietly, and this happens probably mostly in the spring, summer, and fall. We have this really beautiful deck. And as you look out in our yard, we're up Emigration Canyon, we're in the mountains. And so as you look out on our deck, you can't see there are no other homes visible.
Mhm,
It's just mountains and pine trees. And so often we'll go out in the evening, Lindy and I, and maybe, I have Chase and Caitlin who are staying with us, and they may come out with us too, but it's being outside in the evening and either having that connection or just, looking at the nature. And so that is something that's really important to us, to both myself and Lindy.
yeah. And so you made me think of something in terms of exercise and, meditation and taking care of
Mhm.
yourself. I think I want to make a separation here, a distinction between taking care of yourself and self-care.
Okay.
Because,
Tell me about
because,
that.
yeah, because for example, showering, like a hot shower, that can be self-care. That's also part of taking care of yourself,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so, I think it goes back to what we said of self-care needs to be intentional, right?
Okay.
Maybe you're going to say, all right, I want nobody to interrupt me because I have this problem. My kids will come bursting in on me if I have to lock my door. Otherwise, or even still, even if I do lock the door, I've got somebody banging on the door. That's not very relaxing when you're
No.
in the shower.
No.
And so, you could maybe say, all right, I need a long hot shower. I'm stressed out and I want to relax. That can be self-care.
Yeah.
But if you just, I mean, I've got to shower because hygiene, right?
Yeah. Right. And
Then
that's just to be care of. Yeah.
that might not necessarily be self-care. And so, I want to separate the two because maybe some people think, oh, I shower every day. That's my self-care. But are you intentional about your shower and your ritual, right? And so,
I
uh,
think that's a good distinction to make. I agree
yeah.
with you.
And I
And so the keyword intentional, being intentional about what you're trying to achieve. Yeah.
Yes. And so, I think self-care is very much intentional. And so, whatever it is, I discovered a new self-care just today, actually.
What's that?
So I'm a religious person. Most people who listen know that. And so I study my scriptures every morning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have been struggling with since school's been out, I've kind of been struggling a little bit with waking up during the day. I'm feeling more sluggish in the morning. And so I need more sunlight because usually during school I'll take my kids outside or I drive my kids to school and so I'm getting exposure to sunlight and I'm not getting that as much now that they're not in school.
Yeah.
And so what I did this morning is I decided to do my scripture study outside. And we recently got it's like a little mini pool that's got a filter on it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm outside and I'm doing my scripture study. It's really peaceful and this filter's going in the background and it sounds like a little stream burbling and I can hear the birds and there's this owl hooting that hasn't gone to sleep yet. And it was so quiet and it was so peaceful. And I'm like, wow, this is really, really nice. And that for me was self-care.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It sounds really wonderful. It made me think of something, though. I've talked about Andrew Huberman. He's a professor at Stanford. And going out in the morning when you can and getting that direct sunlight
Yes.
is really critical for people. And I hope I'm not making this up for about 20 minutes at least. I mean, it can be more than that.
Yeah.
But it's one of the ways to reset your circadian clock. And so you may not think that doing that in the morning is going to have an effect with your sleep at night, but it will. It will have
Okay.
a profound impact on it. And so I think a lot of people don't get that enough, and it's really important. So good. That's
And
great. It sounds like a good self-care.
yeah, well, and going back to that a little bit, getting that light first thing in the morning, because
Mhm.
sometimes you can't go outside. At the very least, open your blinds,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
sunlight really, I think we underestimate how important sunlight is. It's probably one of those things we take for granted because it's always there.
Yeah. And that's what Huberman would say. I think we underestimate. We don't realize the importance of sunlight, of actual
Yeah.
sunlight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, you're going outside and getting it, but
Hmm.
I mean, if there's a thunderstorm going on outside,
Right.
maybe don't go.
You can't do that. But he would
Yeah.
say turn on as many bright lights as you can then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because some
And
people might get up in the dark as well, especially in wintertime. If I'm
yep.
getting up at 5 or 5:30, it's going to be dark for quite a while. And so I just
Mhm.
flip on all the lights in my office.
Yeah. I mean, and then, the same thing can go for at nighttime to help yourself relax and unwind
Mhm.
and wind down for the evening. It's important to
Dim
dim
light.
your, yeah,
Mhm.
dim your lights, avoid screens as much as you can. And
Yeah.
if you're not avoiding screens because maybe you're a student like I am and you spend all day, look into blue light filter glasses. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. And they're very common now and you can pick them up pretty much anywhere. Although I will say about blue light filter is sometimes they say blue light filter, but they don't actually filter a lot of blue light. So if you want a good quality pair or if you want to test them, go to your optometrist and talk to
Oh.
your optometrist about blue light filter glasses. In fact, if you're a student or if you work in technology, I hope everybody who is working with technology or is sitting in front of screens all day is using some sort of blue light filter lens. In fact, they even have blue light filter contact lenses now.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a newer thing, and I wear them now, and they're actually pretty comfortable.
Fortunately, I'm in a profession where I mean, I write my notes and stuff like
Yeah,
that. Otherwise, most of my day is spent just in front of people, talking and listening.
and I'm in school right now, and so a good chunk of
Kind of
my
the
day,
opposite. Yeah.
yeah, I'm an online student
Yeah.
too, and so a good chunk of my day is spent in front of a screen, and it's the same thing with my husband. He's in technology, the world of technology, and so he stares at a computer screen all day, and so blue light filter. It's worth looking into.
Yeah. So here's some takeaways. I think one, think about it. A lot of people don't think about self-care as being important. I think it really is important. And if you're feeling burned out or even tired or sad or unhappy, I think, one of the things you can do is think about self-care. And then I like your distinction about self-care being more intentional. Like I am doing this because, I consider it to be self-care. And then it's very individual. So I'm going to make my apologies for all the people who love the
reality TV
TV shows. I just want them to think about it. Are they being intentional about self-care?
Well, Mark, you've been a professional psychologist now for over 25 years.
Yeah, a long time.
You have the right to that opinion. I mean, you've seen a lot of people who are struggling, so you have the right to that opinion.
Yeah, but I think it's mostly an opinion. I really think getting wrapped up in other people's drama, like why would you do? There's enough drama in life itself. Well, so think about your self-care and do it. Yeah.
Yes, that's the main takeaway is start doing it.
Yeah.
Figure out something, even if it's just 10 minutes before you go to bed or whatever you have to do. Make it a priority.
Right.
So next week, we are going to get into personality. And so I think this is going to be a really fun topic. We're going to kind of talk about personality types and where personality stems from. And
how are they formed? What is it? Which is kind of a hard thing to define. But we'll try.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about the various theories out there and, maybe some personality quizzes that people can take. It's an entire field of psychology, which was kind of surprising to me. And I kind of wondered, why do people care this much? But apparently there are psychologists out there that really do. Like their whole field of study is personalities.
Yeah, and we can talk about the personality assessments that are validated. And there are some. And most of the ones that you're going to find online are not. They're just for entertainment.
They're just for entertainment. We'll see y'all next week.
Have a good week, everyone.
Have a question for Dr. Burton? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com. This podcast was produced and edited by Liz Lang. Music is by Audio Lounge.